It is the greatest sword in all the world of men. Yet its story is actually one of two swords. While both would be described as being like a flame, one becomes a symbol of glory and majesty lost, while the other is that glory and majesty returned. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover Narsil and Andúril. Unlike so many things in Tolkien's mythology, the ancient origin of Narsil is actually told within the pages of The Lord of the Rings. As he is about to enter the Golden Hall in Edoras, Aragorn says his blade was wrought by the dwarven smith Telchar in the deeps of time. Now, when it comes to determining when this may have been, that is when we turn to Tolkien's larger writings. We learn more about Telchar in both the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales. We know he was a dwarf who dwelt in Nogrod during the First Age. We also know that soon after the year 260, Telchar would create the Dragon-helm of Dor-lomin. And given that dwarves typically lived roughly 250 years if not killed in battle, we can be pretty certain that Narsil was indeed forged during the First Age. Among the greatest smiths of any race in all the history of Middle-earth, Telchar would create not only the Dragon-helm and Narsil, but also the knife Angrist, which Beren would use to pry a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. It is said that Narsil shone with the light of the sun and moon, and indeed its very name means red and white flame. Unlike the Dragon-helm or Angrist, we know nothing of Narsil's location or ownership in the First Age, or even the vast majority of the Second Age. It isn't until Elendil wields it in The Last Alliance that the blade is mentioned. And while we will certainly cover those events in the sword's life, we must first note that somehow this blade went from the hands of the dwarves to the hands of men. In the First Age in particular, there are very few interactions between these particular races. And indeed, more often than not, these moments involve treachery and death. Yet there are some likely ways that this blade could have gone from Telchar to the Edain, the ancestors of Númenor. One possibility is that this blade could have come to King Thingol of Doriath, for the king himself says that Telchar had created some of the greatest items in his treasury. Thingol was the great-great-grandfather of Elros, the first king of Númenor. Could it be that Elwing rescued this blade out of her father's realm when it fell, and gave the blade to her son? Another possibility is that this blade was given directly to the Edain by the dwarves, though it's hard to say under what circumstances that would take place. We know that the First Age ends in the year 590, roughly 230 years after Telchar made the Dragon-helm. Since he was presumably already an accomplished smith at that time, it's fairly likely Telchar had already died of old age, or possibly even battle, prior to the end of the age. Could it be that this great blade was given to or taken by the men of the First Age when Beleriand and much of Nogrod and Belegost were destroyed? In the end, we can only guess how this sword made its way to the famed Númenorian Elendil. What we do know, however, is that this blade would be carried by the High King of Gondor and Arnor as his great alliance marches upon Mordor. We are told of the glory of both king and blade. The host of Gil-galad and Elendil had the victory, for the might of the elves was still great in those days, and the Númenorians were strong and tall and terrible in their wrath. Against Aeglos, the spear of Gil-galad, none could stand, and the sword of Elendil filled orcs and men with fear. For it shone with the light of the sun and of the moon, and it was named Narsil. Then Gil-galad and Elendil passed into Mordor, and encompassed the stronghold of Sauron, and they laid siege to it for 7 years, and suffered grievous loss by fire, and by the darts and bolts of the enemy. And Sauron sent many sorties against them. There in the valley of Gorgoroth, Anarion, son of Elendil, was slain, and many others. But at the last the siege was so strait that Sauron himself came forth, and he wrestled with Gil-galad and Elendil, and they both were slain, and the sword of Elendil broke under him as he fell. But Sauron also was thrown down, and with the hilt shard of Narsil, Isildur cut the ruling ring from the hand of Sauron and took it for his own. Then Sauron was for that time vanquished, and he forsook his body, and his spirit fled far away and hid in waste places, and he took no visible shape again for many long years. Narsil, which is broken into 2 pieces, would be taken by Isildur back to Gondor after the victory over Sauron. He remains there for 2 years, preparing his nephew Meneldil to take the throne of Gondor. As Isildur marches north toward Rivendell, intending to then go on to take the throne of Arnor, his company is waylaid by orcs. While the One Ring and Isildur's life would be lost in the encounter, the 2 shards of Narsil had been sent with the king's esquire, Otar, who bore them to Rivendell. The shards of Narsil would be an heirloom of the kings of Arnor, and kept within the Mannish kingdom for nearly 2,000 years to come. Presumably they would be housed within the original capital of Annúminas, and the later capital of Fornost. Through all the fracturing of the North Kingdom and the wars with the Witch King, the shards would be kept in honor by the kings of men. However, after Arnor's destruction in 1974 of the Third Age, the final king and first chieftain of the Dunedain Rangers, Aranarth, would bring the shards of Narsil along with the scepter of Annúminas, the ring of Barahir, and the Elendilmere to Rivendell. There Elrond would safeguard the shards for nearly 1,000 years, before finally bestowing them upon one of Elendil's line. In 2951, when Aragorn, son of Arathorn, is 20 years old, Elrond reveals to him his true lineage, and gives him the broken blade of his forebear. Aragorn would carry it in his travels as a ranger, for we see he possesses it when he encounters Frodo and the hobbits at the Prancing Pony. There, Butterbur, rather lately, delivers a letter from Gandalf to the hobbit, which contains a poem. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Aragorn reveals that the poem is indeed about him, and reveals the sword, saying, "But I am Aragorn," and those verses go with that name. He drew out his sword, and they saw that the blade was indeed broken a foot below the hilt. "Not much use, is it, Sam?" said Strider, "but the time is near when it shall be forged anew." Later, at the Council of Elrond, the Elf Lord would tell, among other things, the tale of Elendil's sword being broken, and later Aragorn would reveal it to all, including the Gondorian, Boromir. "And here in the house of Elrond more shall be made clear to you," said Aragorn, standing up. He cast his sword upon the table that stood before Elrond, and the blade was in 2 pieces. "Here is the sword that was broken," he said. After the Fellowship of the Ring is formed, Tolkien tells us that the time had come for the great sword forged by Telchar and wielded by Elendil to be remade. The sword of Elendil was forged anew by elven smiths, and on its blade was traced a device of 7 stars, set between the crescent moon and the rayed sun, and about them was written many runes, for Aragorn, son of Arathorn, was going to war upon the marches of Mordor. Very bright was that sword when it was made whole again. The light of the sun shone redly in it, and the light of the moon shone cold, and its edge was hard and keen. And Aragorn gave it a new name, and called it Andúril, Flame of the West. We see here once again it is described as shining with the light of sun and moon, light that Elrond had said was extinguished when it was broken. Finally, 3,000 years after its breaking, the Sword of the King is renewed. In Lothlorien, Galadriel would give Aragorn a sheath for the blade, which has a design of flowers and leaves wrought of silver and gold. It also has written upon it the sword's new name, and the lineage of the sword set in elven runes formed of gems. Galadriel makes an important declaration upon giving Aragorn the sheath, especially given the blade's history. The blade that is drawn from this sheath shall not be stained or broken, even in defeat. Many times in the coming days, Aragorn would use Andúril in battle, and its deeds would be well known in the days to come. Yet we also see Aragorn present the sword in order to show his credentials as the heir to the throne of men, most notably in instances with the Rohirrim. Aragorn threw back his cloak. The elven sheath glittered as he grasped it, and the bright blade of Andúril shone like a sudden flame as he swept it out. "Elendil," he cried, "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and am called Elisar, the Elfstone, Dúnedain, the heir of Isildur, Elendil, son of Gondor. Here is the sword that was broken and is forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly." And after joining his sword with those of Eomer and Theoden in great deeds at Helm's Deep, Aragorn would reveal the blade to Sauron within the Palantir. In the books, this comes prior to his taking of the Paths of the Dead, and Aragorn describes the encounter to Gimli. "But Sauron has not forgotten Isildur and the sword of Elendil. Now in the very hour of his great designs, the heir of Isildur and the sword are revealed, for I showed the blade reforged to him. He is not so mighty yet that he is above fear. Nay, doubt ever gnaws him." Aragorn summons the Oathbreakers and uses the army to take the ships of the Corsairs. Then, both king and blade return at last to Gondor and glory. There came Legolas, and Gimli wielding his axe, and Halbarad with the standard, and Elladan and Elrohir with stars on their brow, and the dour-handed Dúnedain, rangers of the north, leading a great valor of the folk of Lebanon and Lamadon, and the fiefs of the south. But before all went Aragorn, with the flame of the west, Andúril like a new fire kindled, Narsil reforged as deadly as of old, and upon his brow was the star of Elendil. Aragorn would wield Andúril both at the Pelennor Fields and at the later Battle of the Black Gate. And finally, with Sauron defeated once and for all, the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor are reunited and restored. Like the blade that was broken in two, the world of men was made whole once more. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. CCDC Red Team, Evil Chameleon, Tom DeBombadil 19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Freya Firestar, Chris and Meg Q, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Kiara Berlin, Z and N, Evely, Kia, Landry Quinn Walker, Ice Glazer, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.